Okay, 1 p.m. How's everyone doing? What day is this? Tuesday. So we have this class, we have class on Thursday, and then we are in the final stretch. I think you got my my announcement by email of everything that's going on the next week and a half or so. We have class today. We have our project workshop on Friday. I'm bringing coffee. Show up with your group mates, just hang out. This is not gonna be like you come and sit in my office and we chat, just the two of us. This is gonna be like come and sit down, hang out in the lobby, mill around as you like, very low key. There's a chance, so I'll be there. There's a chance some of the TAs will be there too. So this is just a good time to get some feedback, if you wish, on your project. Another check-in point with your group mates and such. So hopefully that's helpful. That's on Friday morning, and then we are off to the races. So let's see, Part 5 project is due on Sunday, so keep that in mind. I've given a little bit of extra structure for this, so this is a little bit more than just creating a figure. So give me a little bit more information about your project. This is the last thing that's due before the final. For the final exam week, we have this class. We're meeting in this room on Thursday, I believe it is. So all of the details are here. I have one class. Yep. So this class we're meeting at 10 a.m. on Thursday. So kind of a rough time. 10 a.m. isn't so bad, but it's on a Thursday. During this time, you're going to present for 3 minutes what you found. This is incredibly quick. You're going to have basically 2 slides. On Thursday, I'm going to show you the best practices for how to put these slides together. This is a really powerful skill, using slides to communicate, particularly with data. So we're going to talk this through. But your slides will be due the night before, so keep that in mind. They'll be due on Wednesday. I'll send out more information about the specifics, how to submit your work, a little closer to the time. And then Friday of finals week, so May 1st, just send me your paper and your replication before 4 p.m. on Friday. So that's what we have left in the semester, and then you're off to the summer. Months and months of not sitting in a classroom. You ready? So class time the rest of the semester here is going to be pretty low key. What I want to do the next 2 classes, today we're going to talk about an example of a project I might put together. My research is in political economy, so it's like the decisions under constraint around voting. So I'm going to show you an example of a project I might put together, how I construct the questions, how I construct the notebook, and then how I put it into a paper. I've given you the notebook, so this is the project notebook we're working with today, and then also a draft of a project. So you can use this as a template. I give this to you as examples of how to construct these things. It's very short, keep it very structured, and not that long. So that's where we're going today. So we're all done with exercises that you're turning in. We're all done with homework that you're turning in. All we have left are the projects and then presenting the work. All right. Should we begin? That's not the rousing enthusiasm I'm looking for, but I do realize it's late April, so. Anyone coming out to cheer the marathon? That's like all I'm thinking about these days. Yeah. Come and cheer me on. It's next weekend. Better not be this weekend. So it's like, the Sunday morning, it's like May 3rd. So you might be out of town by then. Okay, so let's get started. So I just want to show you an example. We're gonna have lots of time at the end to sit down and talk about your final projects. And like I mentioned, I wanna have a conversation with as many of you as possible. Like ideally, I would see every one of you. So come talk to me if we haven't talked already. Either today or after class on Thursday or during office hours on Friday. So this is just an example of the kind of project I might try to work on. Like I mentioned, my research area is in like decisions under constraint around voting. So one question I might ask is something like this. So do counties with higher unemployment vote at higher rates? So we're going to jump back and forth between the notebook and like a Google Doc, where I would be writing up how I would sort of document my process. But this question comes from, the literature around voting decisions, right? In general, like when people are dissatisfied with economic conditions, people may go to the polls more. So if I'm very unhappy with how the economy is being run, maybe I would show up to the polls at a higher rate. And we might see this pattern more often in counties with higher unemployment rates. Like unemployment is really unfortunate, and if you've ever been unemployed, being unemployed is just very uncomfortable. And so if you're unemployed, it might be the case that you would wish to vote more. So you're just unhappy with the state of the world, and so you go to the polls to express your opinions at a higher rate than you would if you're happy with how things are going. So that's the question we're going to try to answer using data. This is something we can't build. We could build many types of economic models around, but the best way to answer this question is with data. So that's where we're going to start in the notebook. And with the final project, you're going to hand in your notebook as well, just so I can see your process and then have it on file as documentation for next semesters. So if your project is really nice, I might highlight it for next semester. So I also have a document here. This is just, I've written this up. Hopefully you can't edit this. Are you able to edit this? Someone try? No, you can't edit? Nice. Thank goodness. That would be, I guess we could like wiki this. We all write it together, like a big group project. But at the beginning, the best way I've found to start these kinds of papers is just to give a bit of background. Essentially, do voters turn out at higher rates during periods of economic dissatisfaction? So it's like in counties where there's a lot of unemployment, maybe I turn out at higher rates. Maybe those counties turn out at higher rates. So what I did here is I just wrote up a bit of the story. So why do I think this is an interesting question? Well, I've just documented some of these things here. 3 sentences. I think this is more than enough for what we're doing, and a good place to start. The introduction just gives the reader a sense of why we're thinking about this problem, or thinking about this question, and then posing the question. So then the second thing is it has to be feasible. Like, we can ask lots of very broad, very interesting questions, but for it to be like something we can handle with data, it has to be narrow enough that we have data available to answer the question. And so the second thing to do is just talk about and describe what you're doing with data. So here I actually have 2 data sets. I have population records and unemployment records collected from the census. So we've walked through a bit of where one would get census records from. There are 2 primary sources, but for me, I just downloaded this from iPooms. So ipooms.org, which is one of the sources listed. This is one of the more advanced methods, but people in this class use it all the time. And then the second one, I got election records from the MIT Elections Lab. So I just wrote out where I got my data and what types of variables I'm using in those data sets. Okay, and then I just talk about county level averages. And then here I'm mentioning that I took a difference in unemployment by county and turnout rate by county. And then I plotted the histograms of my main variables. Okay, so so this is the question, this is some of the intro, some of the motivation. And what I'm gonna do is just load the data set in my notebook. So to create the figures for the paper, I'm just gonna load these things. So this is connecting. And what I did is put this on my website. So this is just a path to the data set that I put on my website. But if you're using Google Drive, this would be some of the ways of setting that up and pointing to your Google Drive account. Okay, so nice. So we're going to load the data set. We find what the data set looks like. I've done a little bit of extra work here just to get the data to look nice. I have the index, which is the county, and then I have year. And then I just have all this information about the election. So like which county? So this is Alabama. Anyone from Alabama? Okay. I didn't think so. But you can see who's on the ballot, so Democrat, Republican, Green Party, or other. And then you can see how many votes went each way. You can see the total votes, and then essentially the date of the election. Or I'm sorry, this is the version, so not the date of the election, but when the data was put together. So that's the elections data, a really powerful data set to work with. And you can see it's by county. The next thing I did, I commented all of this out. We actually don't need this. I collected data from the census using iPooms. This is just a bit of like formatting of data. We're not going to use it today, but it's what I used to construct this data set. This is sort of more advanced methods. So I commented it out. We don't particularly need to get into the details in class. If you have questions about that, let me know. What I did is I did a few sort of data operations and then saved the data set as a file. And then I'm just going to load that file I created. So here I have county, the county FIPS. So county FIPS is just a number associated with each county in the US. So it's just a nice way of keeping track of which county is which. I have the year, so this is census records, and then this is the county and the year. This is the average sex of the county, so this is zeros and ones, and then we just take ones and twos, and we take the average. So this is like basically a balanced sex ratio. So this should be right around 1.5. This is the average age, so around 48. This is the unemployment rate, so what percentage of the population is unemployed according to the census in 2007. The same county going from 2007 to 2011, we saw a massive increase in unemployment. This was during the Great Recession. So pre-recession in 2007 up to during the recovery in 2021. So this was a pretty big increase in unemployment, like historically high. And then I also have the median income. So this is median, I guess this is individual income, which seems pretty low. And then the last one is population. So this is total population of the county. You remember, this is Alabama, which is one of the poorest states in the country. So that might explain how low these things are. Okay. So then the last thing I'm going to do is just, it's like an additional layer of data processing. This is just, I have the elections data and I have the census data, and I just need to put them together. This is some of the boring stuff. Gemini is pretty good at helping you out with these things. We haven't talked a lot about these data operations. So these are some of the things some of you are doing behind the scenes. If you ever get stuck, just send me an email and or drop by my office and we can resolve this stuff. I've seen a lot of you in my office about these things, which is great. So anyway, this is, I'm just going to select for only the 2012 elections data and then 2011 census data. And we're going to merge 2011 with 2012 to get the census and the elections data in the same data set. And then this one is just, I want to do the same thing, but for 2008 and 2007. And then I'm going to look at, this is just merging the data sets together, which gives me turnout and a bunch of other things. And then this is merging two election years together. So there's a lot of work I did here that's not particularly useful to talk about in class. Just a bunch of steps to create the variables that I need for my project. So there's a lot of detail here. Most of you, I think, are working with data sets where there's a bit of work at the front end, maybe not this much. This is just some stuff we have to do to make sure the data set works for our purposes. Okay, so that leaves us with our question. The first question is, our main question is, did areas with higher unemployment between these 2 years also see higher voter turnout rates? So did a change in unemployment, so did counties with an increase in unemployment end up turning out at higher rates? Would be another way of saying this question. So what I'm going to do every time I start working with a data set, I want to understand what the variables are saying. What's in the data set? And the way we do this is we start with part one. We started the semester by summarizing single variables. That's what we do in our project. So the first thing I'm going to do is just run a histogram. So this is just a histogram of the change in turnout between 2008 and 2012. So the horizontal axis is just the change, and then the count is on the vertical axis. So this is just how many counties fall into each one of these bins. And what you can see is between 2008 and 2012, turnout seems to go down across the board. 2008 was a historic election. 2012 was much less sort of politically exciting. And you saw this reflected in the change in turnout rates. Most counties saw a decrease in turnout rates between these 2 years. Okay, any questions here? So nice. So that's the first variable. That's like our first main variable. The second one is the change in unemployment. So here we were going through a recession. So my expectation going into this question is that unemployment would go up during this time. And that's what we see. So the horizontal axis is the change in unemployment between these 2 years. This is 0. And we see a lot of counties experiencing an increase in unemployment between these 2 years. Okay. Any questions here? So this is pretty unfortunate for the economy and for households. So our main question is essentially, are these things related? So is there a relationship between are counties that experience higher decreases in unemployment or higher unemployment between these 2 periods? Are those counties turning out differently than counties that didn't experience much of a change in unemployment? Is there something going on here? And my expectation would be counties that saw an increase in unemployment would also be the counties, because they were so dissatisfied with how the economy was going, that they would vote at higher rates relative to counties that didn't see much of an increase in unemployment. So what we're going to do is just plot out that relationship as a scatter plot. I have 2 numerical variables, and all I'm going to do is just create a scatter plot to check if there is a relationship. And we're going to do this in 2 different ways. The first one is with a scatter plot of turnout and unemployment directly. So I'm just going to plot unemployment against turnout. This won't run because we actually don't have unemployed and turnout. I think we have them as, let's see, cross 2012. We called this cross 2012. And let's just check the variables here. So we have unemployed and we have turnout. So we can just plot those against each other. Let's say cross 2012. And the horizontal axis is just going to be unemployment. And then the vertical axis will be turnout. And if I plot this, I get this relationship. Okay, so this is just turnout against unemployment in 2012. And what we see here is, I mean, to me, this looks like a slightly negative relationship. It's maybe close to flat, maybe slightly downward sloping. So this is pretty good, but this doesn't tell us, like, counties are very different for many reasons. Counties with lower median incomes, like poor counties, tend to have higher unemployment rates just because those counties are poorer. And it's also true that counties that are poorer also just inherently vote less. If you have more trouble accessing a car, or if your job is less flexible with you, which tends to be the case if you make less, it's harder to go out and vote. So just for like many economic mobility reasons, we would think counties that are poorer tend to vote less. And that's what we're seeing here. So the higher the unemployment rate, the lower the turnout. And this might not be related to economic conditions, or like the economic conditions we're interested in asking questions about. Like, how did the change impact the change in unemployment impact voter turnout? Like, is this about the economy and how that impacts voter turnout, or is this just like baseline conditions in these counties? So this is fine, but the better question to ask is about changes. So what I'm doing here is looking at the changes. So the horizontal axis is the change in unemployment. The vertical axis is the change in turnout. And we get this relationship. I think looking at this, it's not entirely obvious what's going on. Maybe there's a slight upward trend. Maybe it's pretty flat. Maybe there's nothing going on. But this at least gets us in the ballpark of trying to answer our question, which is, if unemployment goes up, are you more dissatisfied? And are you dissatisfied enough to then go out and vote more? So this is fine. This is a good place to start. But we need a model to test this question. Like, is this noise, or is this something meaningfully different from no slope? Okay, so those are the figures. So these are nice figures showing the main relationships. What I'm going to do next is set up a statistical model. In fact, I'm doing two here. I have model 1, which is just the baseline. I think model 2 is the better one. But I've included both of these just for completeness for talking to you about it. But in a project, I would probably just include the second one. If you included the first one, that would be fine too. I think both are valid. I think the second one is just a little better. So what I'm going to do is include, so I'm going to try to predict turnout, so the turnout rate, using an intercept plus a slope coefficient on unemployed. So this is basically just running a line through this data. But to control for like the baseline income of neighborhoods, of counties, I'm going to include a median income control. And what this does is allow me to compare two counties with the same level of income, but different unemployment rates, and see if they're meaningfully different in their turnout rates. So compare two counties with different, with the same baseline income, and then look at differences in unemployment and turnout. So that's the first model. If I run this, so I'm using my cross-sectional data, I'm predicting turnout with unemployment, controlling for median income. I get this model. So this is definitely median income is related to turnout. And this is telling me the higher your median income is, controlling for the unemployment rate, you're going to turn out more. So higher income counties vote more. Conclusion. Very nice. This doesn't answer our question, but this is at least a very interesting result. We also have an intercept. In general, like for most people, interpreting the intercept is not going to be that important. But our main question is about this coefficient on unemployment. This is telling us that counties with higher unemployment tend to vote less. So counties with higher unemployment vote less. We can see the p-value is pretty large. I think traditionally p-values this large are like we don't interpret as strong evidence. You all are more sophisticated. You have more sophisticated knowledge and intuition than most on these things. This is telling us basically it's 1 out of 4. If there's no relationship, 1 out of 4 times we draw a sample, we're going to get a slope this large. Often we talk about like critical regions, like whether it falls inside some confidence interval. In this class, we're not focused on that so much. I think it's it's better to just talk about the p-value directly. Here, this is pretty large for my liking, so I don't really believe strongly in this. What this is telling me, though, is that something is going on with unemployment and turnout, even after we've controlled for income. And it might be that controlling for baseline income is not enough to make meaningful comparisons between between counties. So what I'm going to do next is look at the change in unemployment and compare that to the change in turnout, which is going to meaningfully compare, it's going to give me a better comparison by looking at changes in time. So that's the next model. The next model, which I think is the better one, it allows me to control for just like I'm comparing the same neighborhood or the same county in one period to the next, which allows me basically to compare the same people to each other, which is a better control than just controlling for income on its own. So nice. So this is going to be my model. I'm going to try to predict the change in turnout with the change in unemployment, and then I'm going to control for the change in income. So I'm going to look at two counties with the same change in income, and see if the ones with higher higher unemployment also saw higher turnout. So I'm just going to run this. This is my model here. So a couple of things to note. First off, change in unemployment now has a positive coefficient. And the p-value is much smaller on this. This is saying counties with higher unemployment, counties that saw an increase in their unemployment, also saw an increase in their voter turnout. We have a pretty small p-value here. This is in the range where I'm pretty comfortable being confident in this result. And then we also have this control for median income. This is not a very strong p-value. This is about a quarter again, but this is an important control. We could also do. We could change this model in a couple of different ways, but for our purposes, this is a pretty good model to run with. And what this is telling us is that when unemployment goes up, those counties saw an increase in voter turnout, which confirms my hypothesis at the beginning. Okay, any questions here? So I'm just going to try to write this up. I've already included this in a lot of this analysis in the document. In my notebook, I have two models, right? I'm running the baseline model, but then I'm also checking the changes model. Here I have just some of the summary statistics, or the summary visualizations. And then here I'm talking about the main model that I'm interested in, which I guess is a little different than what I wrote in the notebook. But this question is basically the change in turnout, and we're using the change in unemployment to predict it. But actually, we also have median income as another control variable. So this would be our beta 2. And then this is just a figure showing the relationship. So horizontal axis is change in unemployment, vertical axis is change in turnout. And then I just have a little bit of a description of what those two things are doing. This document is not complete, right? Like, I would say a little bit more about this, but this is at least a visualization of the main results. And then here's my residual plot, which we'll do in the notebook in a second. I don't have the model written out here, but this would be my model output. You could put the model, the output table in the document if you like. or you could just report the coefficients. Critically, I have this sentence, which says what the model finds. This is an interpretation of the statistical model I just ran. You all have the confidence and the knowledge to look at a regression table and understand what it means, but not everyone does. And communicating what the regression table means in English to someone who doesn't understand how to read the table is one of the important skills I hope you take from this class. It's one of the things I expect in your final projects. So a sentence like this in the paper and in the slides, like we'll talk about next class, I think is one of the most important skills. First off, interpreting the coefficient. So this is the coefficient interpretation, which is pretty close. The numbers here are a little bit different because I have the control variable, but it's pretty close to what we have in the notebook. So 2792, 2792. This is roughly a 1/4 increase in turnout. So I'm saying when unemployment goes up by 1%, I see a roughly 1% increase in the turnout rate. So this is the interpretation of the coefficient. And then I'm just stating my confidence in this result. I'm not talking about critical regions. I'm just stating how confident I am. I'm not talking about a null hypothesis, whether we're rejecting the null hypothesis or not. I'm just stating the probability of seeing this thing according to the null hypothesis. So tell me you understand what a p-value means. And this is just an example of how one would do that. Okay, any questions here? I'm very confident that counties that saw an increase in unemployment also saw higher turnout rates. I'm very confident in that result. And then you could write a conclusion. So this would just be describing like the main conclusion of the paper. We had an introduction which told us the question. We had all of this analysis work. And then the conclusion is just saying, okay, we have this question. What's the answer? What's the answer to my question? And then you just say it. So in this case, it would be, if I were to say it in words, it'd be something like, voting is important. Often we're motivated to vote by economic dissatisfaction, and that appears to be what's going on here. That when unemployment goes up, we vote more, and by this much, by about 1/4 percentage point. And we're pretty confident in that result. Anyway, so I have a bunch of figures, I have a bunch of results, and it's all in about 2 pages. There are things I would do to make this a little bit shorter, more compact, but this is quite a bit. This is about the length I'm looking for. This is a great template to follow if you're not clear on what you're doing. You don't have to follow this template exactly, but I've found following this template is just very clear communication, which is the reason we use this kind of template over and over again. It's just tried and true. The last thing is sources. So these actually didn't fit on 2 pages for me, which is kind of okay. A couple of things to note here. First, I'm including sources for both of my data sets. I want you to tell me where you got your data. Be very clear about that so that I can go find it. Here I have my 2 data sources. The last one is I use Claude, one of the big 3 AIs at the moment. I use Claude all the time. I used it in this project. I wrote some of my code with Claude. I don't think I wrote any of the paragraphs, but I did use Claude for some of my code. This is okay. You're allowed to use AI. You have to tell me what you used it for. Just be very clear on what you're doing. I think I mentioned this last class. I had some students who, in their sources, documented their use of an AI tool, and they got an A. It's okay to use it. You just have to tell me that it's yours, that you're doing it, and your work has to be your own. So you can't just copy something, just like you can't just have your roommate write your project for you. You can't have the AI write your project for you, but you can talk to your roommate, and you can talk to an AI. Just tell me that you're doing it. Does that make sense? Wouldn't it be silly if I was using AI and was asking you not to? I guess we use calculators all the time. In some exams, you can't use calculators. But so this is nice. That's the project. And then the last thing to do is to check the residuals. I included a residual plot in the file, but I've just run it in the notebook. And I think this is pretty good. There might be a bit of heteroscedasticity, but I'd be comfortable with this residual plot. All right. So then you're going to send me your notebook with all of these, with all the documentation of your work. You're also going to send me your paper, and before the presentation, you'll send me your slides. So we have 3 things to turn in. Any questions about any of this? Okay, so this is 2 parts. So we have the notebook and the paper. This is a pretty good first foray into what these things will look like. If you haven't started already, this is maybe helpful guidance. I think almost all of you are definitely more than a step or 2 into this. We've started basically from the beginning of the semester with the Part 1 project. But if you're unclear about the expectations, this is intended to communicate those to you directly and give you a bit of guidance on this stuff. Next class, we'll talk about slides. I think it's my favorite slideshow all semester. I'm going to give you my hot takes and tell you what not to do. The rest of class today, I'd love to talk to as many of you as possible. We have still like half an hour left of time in this room. I'm going to be here until everyone's gone, and I'd love to talk to you about your projects. If this is also a good time to just sit down with your classmates, with your group mates, either here or somewhere nearby, just to talk about your projects. I'll see you next time. Yeah.